Greetings, pop pickers. Happy Monday. Bonus points if you can name what this is from. It's one of my favourite mugs. I hate Morndas. How are you all today? I hope you are well on this post-daylight savings time day shenanigans, which I still don't understand why we're still doing it. Wish we could get rid of it. Jet lag to hell as a result. But yeah, I hope you're all doing good. And let's just have a quick peek to see who is with us so far in the chat. I do appreciate you all being here. We got Corey, Salty Texas C, the great Lord Thoth, who I wanted to have on here today, but I don't know how to get you the StreamYard link, Thoth. But glad you're here anyway. Rough Girl, you dirty, dirty girl. Welcome to you. Nice to see you. One Man Show, wonderful to see you too. The great and wonderful D. Bud Martin, great supporter and contributor to this fellowship. As I say, One Man Show, Cosmic Squirrel, my friend. I think I sent you the link if you want to jump on later. Because you're cosmic and that fits the theme. And yeah, and tea. So One Man Show's talking about tea. This is what's in here. Nothing else, just tea. The most psychedelic drink of all. Great. So yeah, thanks for joining. I have some esteemed guests going to join me, guys who know their science fiction, write their science fiction, and I'm very pleased to get to stream with them. So first of all, I'll introduce a streamer who does the most fantastic science fiction content. Really love it. It is our good friend, the Nerdporeal Lifeform, or Nerdporeal Lifeform, whatever you prefer.
Nerdporeal. Greetings, everyone. How's everybody doing? I mean, the name of my channel is based off of. I was thinking about when I was a kid. I was thinking about how I used to read the Star Trek Encyclopedia. There was like the 1997, 1998 version. So I was reading it, and I read like everything. And one of the definitions was corporeal or incorporeal.
Oh,
so I thought about that, and I thought about just like, like what would it be? And I just thought nerdporeal, and I just thought of like just a figure of a man, just a blank figure of a man, head, arms, legs, and stuff, and just put it in like symbols of all the various franchises and stuff. Or in my case, I put a bunch of ships. They're all fonts. Like half of these, like the Enterprise on top, they're all basically, it's a font. It's a typing font. So, but some of the stuff I added, like the Alfred Hitchcock thing on the right arm, or almost on the right shoulder right there. I don't know if you can see it, but I've added some other stuff. Like basically all the things that I like that encompass my likings and stuff.
Full
so
screened you there, and I can just see it. Yeah. Cool. I actually never looked closely at those images on your because I've got really bad eyesight. As an old man, get the glasses on. But yeah, I didn't know that's what those were. So
and right in the crotch area, you can see Babylon 5, just the Babylon 5 name right there.
No comment there about the show.
Exactly. But that show is one of the goats, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think we whilst I wanted to have a sort of flavour of talking about books here, it's not exclusive. We can certainly talk about why we got into science fiction and our loves and inspirations, which is obviously going to cover a lot of movie and TV stuff. I certainly, personally, I've got a lot of book-related stories. But so I would like to introduce guest number 2. It's a man who's not only a great YouTube streamer, but is an author too, a science fiction author no less. So please welcome Kai, M.F.S.
Hey, thanks for having me, man, and hello, everybody.
Yeah,
how's everyone? I hope everyone's good.
Yeah, we're good, man. We're good. Hopefully at some point we'll be talking about this little beauty, which I had some troubles with Amazon. First one got lost, but I finally got the second one. And from what you tell me, this is a collector's item because there's an egregious printing error in it, which I haven't spotted yet. So I've got the collector's item.
I think I was live somewhere when I saw it, actually. Either that or I was on a call with someone, and I spotted it and went, what the hell? I just want my head wanted to explode right there, and I wanted to burn all the ones that I have, and I wanted to like. I was like, the ones I've sold since I updated this to now, like, all have this error.
How would I know which one it is without reading it, of course, because I
You'll
only
know
just got it the
by the
other
time you
day.
get to the end of the book. You'll know.
Right, okay. Yeah. And who did the editing? That's what I want to know.
Me, I will like. I mean, it's not just the edit. It was so. It's a print. It's a formatting thing. It's on me, but it's something I explicitly fixed. So
right.
somewhere something went wrong, and it unfixed itself. And so, because I saw the error, I said, no, I fixed you. I did the thing, and you're supposed to be here. I know that because I saw you correctly, and it's not the case. And so I figured if I'm going to update it again, I'm just going to do one big sweep, and there's little like editing errors, you know, like no space after the period, or like something. There's an extra letter somewhere, you know. There's a couple of those, a few of them here and there. So I'm getting rid of them, and then like it's 160,000. Where there was a lot of errors. There was a lot, and I could only afford to do so much editing.
It's a big book, and I've heard it. I've heard the story because I listened to our friend Zach, Brightest Day, reading it.
Nice.
So I'm aware of how it goes, but it's nice to have the physical book because I've started buying a lot more physical books again, as I had a huge digital collection. But it's nice to have the thing in your hand. I like to support our community too, so thanks for all your good work.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I really do.
May I ask?
I like a physical book.
May I ask what kind of story is this? So is this like a science fiction detective story or something, or?
It's a space opera. So it's a space adventure. We meet a couple. We meet an alien from outside of the universe, and a couple of teenagers, and we go on an adventure with some space pirates who are being chased by a team of by a government strike team.
Sounded like space parrots there. That would be a different book entirely.
Space what? Parrots.
Parrots.
Space parrots.
So the alien is from outside our universe, not just our galaxy. From outside the universe.
Yeah, outside of everything we perceive to be reality.
Right. So there's a multi-dimensional, multi-universe aspect to it.
I like leave that part kind of ambiguous.
Okay. But that's one of my favorite subgenres, is anything that has multiple universes in it. So it's
okay.
It does appeal to me.
I mentioned that, and I plan on getting into an actual debate about it in the book later, like in another book. But the story very much centers on the reality that we can perceive.
Okay, and reality is an interesting topic. My show last week was all about that. What is reality? I think we answered some big metaphysical questions last week. You know, like what is reality? Why is there something rather than nothing? I think we answered all those once and for all. So any scientist or physicist or cosmologist needs to know those answers. They just need to watch last week's replay. It's all done.
Yeah, and to subscribe in case we answer future major big theory of everything questions.
Well, there's always more. That's the beauty of science fiction. There's always more. Yeah, it's never quite settled. So we actually mentioned our friend Zach Brightest Day, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. But I actually did want to kick off with, if you guys don't mind indulging me with, I actually want to show a little video he did, assuming I can get this to work properly, about science fiction. And I really liked what he had to say. It's just a little 3-minute thing. So if you guys don't mind indulging me, I'm going to show that.
I think I know the video and I love it. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so let's share that. Hey, Courtney's here. Yeah,
hi, Courtney.
How are you, lass? So I'm going to try sharing this, and this will probably screw our microphones up again, but we'll see. So this is Zach's great video he made around what is science fiction.
My friends, I ask of you, what is science fiction? The Oxford definition reads as thus: fiction based on imagined future scientific or technological advances and major social or environmental changes, frequently portraying space or time travel and life on other planets. But let's dig a little deeper, shall we? Let us instead take a few brief minutes to define science fiction for ourselves. To do this, let's first look at science. Science is, romantically speaking, the act of expressing the human desire for knowledge and understanding through research and exploration. The technology wrought from this expression is what hurdles us toward the futures and settings we see in the genre. When I reach for science fiction, I see the science as the bones upon which the fiction is built. I expect the science and technology to be rigidly defined, consistently applied, solid, reliable. For these are the bones that will carry us on our journeys, and they must be strong. Let's move, then, onto fiction. Fiction, again, romantically speaking, is the expression of our imagination, put to word and to image. I see fiction as the body and soul which define a story's identity. I expect the story and characters to be familiar and identifiable, yet unique and intriguing. For these are the features around which our memory of an IP forms, and they must be memorable, warts and all. So, to define science fiction for myself is to understand that science fiction is more than the sum of these two things. It is to understand that our imagination of what could be is spurred by our desire to understand what is. Science fiction must tell you a story, only to then have you ask, what's next? What is the next creature we meet? What is the next world we find? What is the next problem we must solve? Sometimes those creatures, worlds, and problems are all too familiar, though they may wear a different face. Other times we are offered something wholly unimaginable, and tasked with imagining it for ourselves. I suppose, then, that science fiction, to me, is a story that tells you, we are here, and asks you, where do we go from here? My friends, tell me below in the comments what science fiction means to you and how you define it. What is it that inspires you to boldly go far, far away and to question the nature of your reality? Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. So say we all.
Yeah, I absolutely loved that video when I first saw it, and Zach really said a lot of the things that I'm not smart enough to say, but somehow feel inside about what the genre is, what it means, where it takes us, why is it important? You know, is it just a bunch of us imagining we're somewhere else, or does it actually mean something, and what's its place in society? So there's all sorts of stuff tied up in that, but and we will get to that, I'm pretty sure. So I'd like to introduce another special guest today who's joined me, and it's fantastic to once again stream with them. We don't get the chance too often, and that's my fault for not getting up early enough in the morning. It is the very wonderful Captain Trek.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks. Pretty good. Yeah, I'm really excited about hanging out with you great sci-fi fans like me. Obviously in our community there's a lot of talk about comics and comic book movies and superheroes, but for me it's more hardcore sci-fi is my thing, amongst other things of course, like music. But so how's your day going so far, Captain?
So far it's going pretty good.
Good. I actually even a little bit of I should have played this earlier, but I've got a little bit of a clip which the start is a little bit of a tribute to you.
Space, the final frontier.
Man does not behold the face of the Gorgon and live.
Oceania has always been at war with Eastasia.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
Science fiction.
Fiction theater.
Here we explored the failure of democracy, the supreme authority from which all other authority is derived.
My lungs taste the air of time, bone past fallen sand.
I spent a long time putting that together, so I thought I'm going to play it.
That was pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
The funny thing is, I wanted to talk a lot about books. Most of those are actually movies, and were always movies. And or if they're movies, they're seriously different adaptations, like Starship Troopers, which, given that that was possibly the first sci-fi book that made a huge impact on me, is interesting to see what they did with the movie, because they made it something very different, which I still love, but it is different. But Michael Ironside remains to this day my favourite man with no arms. So
See you at the party, Richter.
that's right. Well, he loses his arms again in that, doesn't he?
That's right.
Yes, he's not a very fortunate guy with those hands. But so yeah, so really, I did want to start by just chatting to you all and getting your experiences, kind of going around the table of, what got you into science fiction, what attracted you to it, and what were some of the earliest works, and it could be movies or TV, or it could be books that did it for you. So I guess Nerdporeal, we will start going clockwise.
Sure, certainly. That's a really tough one.
It's the big one.
I know in all my streams and stuff I say that Star Wars was really my gateway into science fiction, but that might not necessarily be true. I mean, for live action, it most certainly is true, but when I was younger, I used to watch a lot of cartoons, and science fiction was generally implemented in a lot of cartoons I watched growing up. Like, I used to watch shows like DuckTales, and even the Super Mario show was on. And what they did was they basically took a lot of elements of pop culture, of Western pop culture. So like they've implemented like Star Trek related type of stories, Indiana Jones related type of stories, and whatnot. So some of my earliest stuff came from just watching, after school or Saturday morning cartoons. So, and of course, there was also Mighty Mouse, was another old cartoon that I used to rent from on VHS quite a bit. So there was one that took place in space in particular. I forget what that one was called, but really it was basically, I was in 5th grade. I think I was 10 or 11. It was a difficult school year for me. I was getting less along with the other kids and stuff. So I kind of needed an escape. And I was getting interested in basically just the concept of the planets, the solar system, and the idea of just like there's other stuff out there and stuff. And then a long time ago I saw Star Wars, so I always knew about Star Wars, but it wasn't really until I was 11 that I actually asked my parents to buy the VHSs of the original trilogy, and I watched those. And as an 11-year-old, I just loved them and stuff, and I watched them, and then that kind of opened the way. I got into the Alien movies. My parents had the Alien movies, so I saw the first 2, which are also excellent. My first horror movie too.
Ideal viewing for children.
Exactly. I was 11. I said this on my stream a couple weeks ago, my Alien stream a couple weeks ago. I saw Alien after school, the original, and first it was boring, and then it turned into a slasher haunted house horror movie and stuff. And I've never saw a slasher movie before. So by the time the movie ended and Ripley was the only one left, spoiler alert, I was completely white and drained of like any life energy whatsoever, and I had to go to choir. I went to Lutheran school and stuff, so I had to go to choir practice that evening, and so I was like a zombie at the choir practice. So I saw the Alien movies, and then the big one, the one that really got me interested, I got into Star Trek. I first watched the Star Trek movies. Why did I get interested in the Star Trek movies? Because I find out the character Spock dies. Another spoiler alert. Spock dies in The Wrath of Khan.
Wait a minute. I didn't know that. No, I'm just kidding.
So the whole idea of a main character dying just blew my mind, because I used to watch, like the cartoons and the shows I watch, the good guys always lived. They always made it, always beat the bad guys. Or barely beat the bad guys, but they still always won and they always lived. So this was a totally new concept to me. So I started watching the entire franchise, and I started reading books. I started reading some Star Trek books when I was in grade school. I started reading some Star Wars books. And then I found another movie that was broadcast on WTTW PBS. And it took me three shots to watch it. It was called 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I didn't understand why a movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey begins with the dawn of man and a bunch of people in ape outfits not talking but just acting like a bunch of animals. And I had no idea what was going on.
I recognized my family in that when I watched it.
But it came off as a horror movie because of the this type of music that they play, especially the alien music, is very unsettling. So, and it was probably that unsettling nature that kept me watching and stuff. But then I fell asleep.
That's right. Yeah.
But it was broadcast multiple times, so I finally watched it the whole thing. And then I got to the Jupiter segment, and then the Jupiter segment put me to sleep. It's just, I don't know if it was the type of music, the legato in the music, the smoothness and stuff that just made you want to, that creates that hypnotic effect that makes you want to fall asleep and stuff. I don't know what it is.
You make an interesting point, because 2001 is certainly far from being an action movie. It's long, slow passages, and the first time I saw it as a teenager, I appreciated what he was doing, Kubrick. But for instance, the psychedelic scene where he's going through the tunnel to wherever he goes, it's probably 15 minutes too long. You know, I thought I could cut a few bits out of this. You know, it's long, slow passages of nothing. You have to be in the right frame of mind to watch that movie, I think. And it took me till I was much more mature. Even then, it's not a movie I watch every year. You know.
I'll say this. Excuse me, sorry about that. And when I was in college,
Kubrick.
Yeah, that was I accidentally tipped my computer, put my elbow on my computer. I'll say this. I mean, to this day, I love the movie. I think that it's one of the best visual movies. It's, I mean, it directly inspired Alien. Like just from the the artistic standpoint and stuff. It really, and even the music to a degree really inspired Alien, and Star Wars to a degree too.
Well, the beauty of 2001 is the extremely detailed technical information, the sets, the realistic portrayals, no sound in space. There's no sonar.
Yeah, that's true. Then, like, every time you rewatch the movie, you get, and this is the magic of especially Stanley Kubrick stuff, you notice something different. There's always something different to take away from each viewing and stuff. And I feel that that's what makes him like a movie, a superior movie in my opinion.
Yeah, and then when I was older, I did get the point that the movie is bookended with the raising of mankind, right to this point where mankind becomes this super being, the star baby or whatever. Is in the between is this extremely dry, technical piece, but those are two big themes at either end.
And it just makes you wonder, what's it leaves a lot. One thing Kubrick does is he leaves a lot to the imagination. Like, he rarely will he will rarely take interviews, and he will rarely try to explain himself. And if you try to get him to explain himself, he's gonna be mum about it. So
certainly is now, yeah.
Well, now he's no longer with us, unfortunately.
So
he's now.
So. Those are great. You made some great points there, and particularly about the visual science fiction in terms of movies and TV, getting you into the books after, because it does work both ways.
I did read the novel, the Arthur C. Clarke 2001. It's a totally different. It's a totally different beast.
Well, as we know, of course, the movie was really inspired by his short story, The Sentinel, which goes as far as uncovering of the obelisk on the moon.
Yeah.
The novel was then written following the movie screenplay.
Yeah, and I
believe that's right. Yeah.
And he wrote it under Kubrick's supervision, so Kubrick didn't give him a lot of the stuff that was going to ultimately be in the film and stuff. So
sure. But
and I mean,
Clarke is one of the greats. I mean, that's
yes.
one of those seminal figures in sci-fi.
Yeah,
But,
the big difference I think, or at least the one difference I can think of at the top of my mind, because it's been a long time since I've read that book, is that in the book they go to Saturn instead of Jupiter. The movie they go to Jupiter, but in the book they go to Saturn. So,
yeah. Well,
but
it's
then the
much more. It's much more scenic.
yeah, but then in the sequel, in the books and of the sequels, it basically follows the movie where they go to Jupiter, where they went to Jupiter. And
Yeah, in
stuff.
2010, I found was quite a bit more gripping as a sequel because it was very different movies, more of an action.
You know how I discovered 2010? My buddy, because I showed my friends, we were 18 or like 19, 20 and stuff. They never saw 2001. We all watched it. My friends were like, I wouldn't say they particularly enjoyed it, but they stayed awake for it, so I was impressed. But my friend found this DVD 2010 at like at a flea market, and he bought it for like $1. He bought it for $1, and he brought. He's like, hey. This is the sequel to 2001. I'm like, no way. There's no. They didn't make a sequel to 2001, and that's how I heard about it. And we all watched it together. So I first saw
movie.
2010
I enjoyed it
with my friends. This was the early 2000s and stuff. So I mean, like, so yeah. So
cool find.
Kind
I
of.
know that happened.
Yeah. So thank you for those observations, Sarah. And there's a few things that probably go back to later. But Kai, what's your earliest experiences, and how did you get into this wonderful genre of science fiction?
Well, it all started when I was a wee lad watching
A bailman, if you will.
the literary legend of legends, Reading Rainbow. And I used to watch Reading Rainbow all the time. I used to watch like the Mario Brothers cartoon, Nerdporeal was talking about, and stuff. But one of my earliest explicit memories, I know I shared this story elsewhere, but my earliest explicit memories tying me to sci-fi was when Dad was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I was like, okay, let's see what Dad's watching, because like I was bored with whatever else was going on. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, I started getting a little more focused in on the dude with the thing on his face. I said, hey, Dad, isn't that Reading Rainbow? And he says, oh, yeah, it is. And then like he's trying to watch the show, yeah, it is.
So you'll say anything?
No, he was like he recognized, yeah,
Yeah.
but then he didn't care. I cared. So for me, I was like, oh, Reading Rainbow's in space, and I was so excited about that. And so I watched the show with Reading Rainbow in space. That's like how it started for me. And but I grew up on like my dad was into sci-fi. He was a huge nerd, so like there was always sci-fi around. But in terms of reading, I read all kinds of stuff. Like the Hardy Boys and Boxcar Children, all like standard kid stuff. And I read some of my dad's like 70s sci-fi, like Little Fuzzies and like from that era. And then but I grew up on like The Explorers. Is that the one where the kids turn like a thing into a spaceship? Explorers. And they meet some aliens that stole their dad's spaceship, and they're like hanging out in space.
Could be.
Okay, well, Enemy Mine.
No, I'm not doubting you, sir. I don't doubt you. I just.
Well, the Explorers and Enemy Mine and all kinds of like 80s, E.T., all that classic like 80s sci-fi. But it was kind of always a part of my life, and I gradually drifted towards it once I got really into Star Trek and Babylon 5. Those are my top two.
Right,
got started
the
on Star Trek, and then
Explorers.
Babylon 5 happened, and yeah.
Yeah, I just I'd forgotten about that show. Now that you've mentioned it, The Explorers. But anyway, 1984. It says, is that the same one? Oh, there's an earlier one.
Let me see. Explorers, 1985.
85. There's an
Yeah.
earlier one starring
It's a movie.
Leslie Nielsen, but that's a documentary, I think. But yeah, okay. I had forgotten about that. Very good. So yeah, but now you've obviously you've gone from that into reading books, into writing. Did you always have the feeling you wanted to get into writing science fiction, or was it just to be an author in general?
Neither. I was
Option
I
C.
grew up drawing. No, I did. I grew up drawing, and I always thought, and so did every adult and person around me. Like, that kid's gonna draw shit when he gets old. I'm sorry about that. This kid's gonna be an artist when he gets older. Like, whatever he's gonna do, he's gonna be arting it up. And so I, went to college for art, and I was a designer, and whatnot, and I have a career in art. But the writing thing happened because the story kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, and I had to write it. And so when I was debating, when I was thinking about that, when I was at that stage of like, okay, I need to make this because it needs to get out of my head. It's taking up too much space. I need to like put it down. I was like, I could make a graphic novel because I'm an artist and it'll be easier. But the story wanted to be a book, so I had to learn to write fiction, and
Right.
that took time.
I mean, this is a loaded question, but were there specific influences that informed your choice of that genre? Because obviously you've written something that's a space opera. There is detective-related stuff in it. What was your inspiration for picking that genre?
Just the story was what it was, and it ended up wherever it ended up.
Almost like it
there's
kind
a
of
little
came to you
romance
fully.
in there.
Almost
There's
came
a
to you
little bit
fully
of-
formed in a sense.
Come again?
Came to you fully formed in a sense already. The inspiration.
Kind of.
In terms of the outline. In terms of the outline, anyway.
So in terms of the outline of the story, it was like I had the end first, the end of the first book, because it's the bigger story. I was like, how would I tell the story? How would I start this off? And then, so I was focused on the first book, and I knew how it was going to end. And then I had like some glimpses, like visuals in my head of random things in the middle, like kind of throughout, but I couldn't figure out how to start it. Once I figured out how to start it, it was me just sitting, because I had given myself some rules on what my world does and does not have. And to get the story started, I had to break one of them. So, hey, it worked.
Well, rules is an interesting thing, because what Zach said in his video was, I like to see the rules set, the physics, the science set, and the story revolve around that, and don't keep changing those rules. So,
that's a big problem with current entertainment. Is they keep changing the rules, and it confuses the audience. There's no consistency.
And then they can pull MacGuffins out.
I didn't change my rules. I stuck to my rule, but I also broke it, because like my rule was no aliens. This is a human story, but I start the story off with an alien, and so
the exception that proves the rule. Yes.
But past that, it's like we deal with people and their relationships and what their choices around.
And that's an interesting comment too, which we'll probably talk about a little later too. But the fact that it isn't just a bunch of stuff about science or technology or whatever subgenre. Stories should always be about people at the end of the day.
I mean, the no story is worth telling unless it deals with the conflict of the human heart. That was from what's his name? That one author, I forget. I can't think of his name, from the 1920s. Not Fitzgerald.
The 2020s or the 1920s?
1920s. Faulkner. William Faulkner said that.
William Faulkner.
And I know who I learned that from, and this is going to probably... This has nothing... Well, this guy was a science fiction writer, but he'll never finish his book. His name is George R. Martin. He's the one that kept, saying that when it comes to how he approaches his writing and stuff. So, but but we don't want to talk about what's winter.
So
that's an open wound right now for me.
Right, Captain Marty Spock. Thank you for joining us. We haven't defined it. We've watched a video which attempted to define it. Today, right now, we're just going through our various experiences of how we got into the genre, whether we call it science fiction, speculative fiction, or any other thing. So, Captain Trek, my friend, you and I are probably closer in age group to the youngsters that are with us here. So we may share similar experiences. How did you get into this wonderful thing that we love called science fiction?
Well, honestly, mine was really because of when I was a kid, I had to go to a babysitter. And the babysitter was like, okay, you can either watch Star Trek or go take a nap. I'm going, I don't want to take a nap. Okay, let me watch this Star Trek thing, see what it's about. There was no question on whether I was going to take a nap the next day or any day after that. It's like, oh no, it's Star Trek. I was hooked instantly. And I grew up watching that. Then, of course, Star Wars came out. It's like, okay, I had to see that. Had to see it. And then, of course, as I got older, I started getting into books. And I started out with some Star Trek books and other things like that. And I do have a large collection of Star Trek books, by the way. But then I started asking questions at the library. What's something similar to this? And so I started reading different books. And that's really how I started.
Yeah, I think it's a similar experience for me in that as a young child in the 60s, it was a dual prong thing. I was really a bit of a prodigy when it came to reading. And originally that started out by reading a lot of things about the world, history, geography, space stuff. And I think through the space stuff, that combined with watching Doctor Who, original Star Trek, and this is in the 60s, fantastic, Lost in Space, then movies like Fantastic Voyage, The Time Machine, then a little later shows like The Prisoner and UFO, coupled with things like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and so on, kind of got me into this, imagine if the world was like that, or imagine if I could go here and do this, and imagine if, these things could be real. It really sparked my imagination. So we had I lived in a town that it certainly wasn't the hood, but it was a mining town. So it was a fairly rough and ready place. So like Nerdporeal, being a bit of a nerd at school could cause problems sometimes. But one thing we did have was a really good library. So I'd go down there and I would started scouring the science fiction shelves. And of course, at that point, they were full of things like Asimov, Clarke, Heinlein, Clifford D. Simak, starting to get, Robert Silverberg, Harry Harrison, John Campbell, a lot of classics, this was like early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, a lot of that stuff. And I think for me, I can't remember the first of those books that I may have read, but the one that always sticks in my mind to this day is the one I definitely remember reading and leaving a huge impact on me was Starship Troopers, Robert A. Heinlein. And from then, at that point onwards, there was no doubt I was going to read everything I could get my hands on that was in that genre. Plus, like some of you mentioned, the books, when Star Wars came out later, I read those books, but I had all the Doctor Who books before that from the shows, and we're talking John Pertwee, Tom Baker eras. So those two. So I think it was a mixture of visuals and the books, but because I was a big reader anyway, I absolutely avidly devoured every book in that library. And then as it turns out, in Edinburgh where I lived, there was a science fiction bookstore. So every weekend I'd get in there with my paper round money and buy 3 books, and then I'd go to the record store and buy 3 records, whatever, it was, that was my weekend thing. So, but Starship Troopers just left such a huge mark on me, and certainly got me into military sci-fi and that, also that kind of speculative fiction that says, what if the world was like this? it's a world that's similar to ours, but is very different in the way it's being run. So that's always appealed to me. So.
Oh, is
So,
that
yeah.
what the qualification for speculative fiction?
Speculative fiction. This is this argument could go on forever and does rage online and always has done. Science fiction, I think, could be seen more as science and technology related fiction, which relies on the actual science or that technology to inform the story and what you're doing. Speculative could be seen as more like 1984 could be seen as a speculative fiction novel, not necessarily a science fiction novel, because it portrays a world that's not like ours, but it isn't necessarily based that way because of a technological impact. Now, this is a minefield, and if I can get a link to Captain Spock, you'll come on and correct me, I'm sure. But it's a minefield as around how do you really define these things? Because I love both. I love that alternative worldview, but then there are stories which are written by mainstream authors that may present a world that's being run differently, like The Handmaid's Tale, let's say, by Margaret Atwood. That doesn't really appeal to me. What would much more appeal to me, whereas 1984 does, and yet you could theoretically say they're in the same genre. So, feelings? Anybody? Thoughts?
I'm looking up speculative fiction for myself right now.
Yeah. I looked it up, but like the answers that I got were ambiguous. So then when you said that, I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot more sense. It's a more of a speculation on culture, society, and reality than necessarily other indicators of, say traditional indicators of other genres like spaceships, like, oh well, now we're sci-fi, or like magic, now we're
like
fantasy.
that was my question, like how would we distinguish that from like fantasy, like say something that has like, let's say, low fantasy elements but very equivalent, like medieval type of setting and stuff. So
well, that's a good point. Fantasy to me has always been slightly more, and I'm simplifying this, more of a sort of sword and sorcery and dragons, and here's a completely different world that's not necessarily technology based, but has women in scantily clad outfits with swords. So yeah, and yet, well, let's go back to the history. Thank you, Conan. Yes. Conan, I do not see as science fiction.
Well, but Conan kicked off the sword and sorcery. Like they created sword and sorcery because they didn't want to like lump Conan in with like fantasy and stuff. They're like, Conan's kind of different. There's a lot of naked women and brawny men, and he just leaves the town to die one time. So no.
Some people might see them as the same thing, and I certainly think that within the science fiction genre there is speculative fiction, because much of it involves other alternative worlds or what our future world may look like, etc., etc. But so, I mean, Battlestar Galactica could be set in the future, could be set in the past. Star Trek itself is set in the future. Generally, is set in the future. So you could say it's because it describes a universe where there's a galactic federation and all these different races and there's social and political orders. So you could call it speculative fiction. But it's got lots of people in spaceships and transporters and replicators and holodecks, and I think it relies very much on science for its plots a lot. So
well, the good Star Trek, the later stuff, it relies on violence and stuff that makes it less unique.
Yeah. I mean, an early example, you maybe have to go back to the history of science fiction and where it all got started, and I don't want to delve into
my question
that
is,
too deeply.
Where do you get? My question is, I think science fiction really kicked off with the two authors, Wells and Jules Verne.
Yeah, I think you would. I tend to agree with you for sure. So,
I can't think of anything earlier.
Well, I've got a couple of.
Well, in terms of really kicked off like the popularity, I'd say I'd agree with you there. I think.
I had a few ideas about things I would say were perhaps inspirational in the genre. If I could share this screen. So one of the first ones, and this is the earliest of the ones I've got here, would be Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Oh, so it's not Frankenstein?
Well, it's Frankenstein. Frankenstein. I would. Whilst before that, and indeed throughout history, there have been a lot of fantastical fiction, even within mainstream writers of their day, and we go right back to the Greek era or even before. This, to me, incorporates some attempt at some hard science in that the Doctor is creating the creature using scientific methods.
Yeah, it's very detailed in how he approaches the testing and all that stuff. How he puts together the procedure for testing, whether electricity, how it will work on a cadaver and stuff, and voila, you have Frankenstein's creature, not monster, creature. Because one thing that I love about this book, and this is the one book I actually read in high school that I didn't read Cliff Notes for. Spoiler alert on my side, but we really see the human side of the creature, and we see how he is treated and how he ends up how the creature ends up becoming what he becomes ultimately and stuff. It is a very compelling story.
It is
honestly. Sorry, I was gonna say honestly, what you said about the high school thing, I found that's actually not that uncommon, and I'm with you there because the books they give you to read in high school suck.
Yes, they
don't give you good books, and so they're like, these are the best books, these are the pinnacles of fiction, and you're like, I hate this depressing, self-absorbed garbage, and
I couldn't get past
this.
I couldn't get past The Old Man in the Sea. So if you're an old man and you're trying to fish on the sea alone and you're talking to yourself, I apologize. I don't mean to offend you, but it's boring.
I agree with you. The things that bored me about those they bored me. This didn't.
No.
And I'm not sure I can pin my finger on it because I understand why The Old Man in the Sea is a well-written book, particularly the fact that the writing is kept quite simple and straightforward and very descriptive. They say, well, that's great, he really wrote that well. That kind of novel never really appealed to me and still doesn't to this day. Whereas this did. Now, you could almost make a case as well that this kicked off the horror genre.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really consider this a horror. I mean, I'd say this is more of a thriller. I mean, this at least at the end, it becomes more of a thriller and stuff. When bad stuff happens. Yeah.
But
it's really a character. It's really to me, this is a character study of a creature that just doesn't belong, and he wants the creature. Frankenstein's creature wants to belong. He stalks. Now he doesn't know any better, but he stalks a family, and he's watching this family for months, or at least for a long period of time. Yeah. And the grandfather, or the patriarch of the household, is blind. So one day he just goes in and starts talking to the blind man, and he just has a conversation with him. And it's when the family comes home and they see the creature that they drive him out of the house and stuff. Once again, him having to experience being dehumanized, even though he's a collection of cadavers.
He's not to blame for his own creation either. So there's this, you're sinful, even though he's got nothing to do with the way he's been created. That's a theme that does run through a lot of science fiction as well in various places.
And he ends up blaming Frankenstein himself, Victor.
Yeah,
it's very much a reflection on the human condition too.
Absolutely.
It's my favorite. It's my
original sin almost as well. Yeah, concept of original sin.
Yeah, anything that's really drives that human that gives that human element to the story is what I really find compelling and stuff, and that's why I love I love the Star Trek shows, and I love Babylon 5 for that same reason. So just that human element that makes it timeless.
Attempting to write plots that involve human concerns, but in a different setting from the one we're used to. And the stuff, because ordinary dramas bore the shit out of me. Set in the present day with present day concerns and people going about their everyday lives and all that stuff bores the shit out of me. I like science fiction because it takes you out into a different setting, and how would you react in that? There's good Colin Archer Colin mentioned utopian, dystopian, or alternate history. I love those. I see those as definitely subgenres of sci-fi, even if they don't necessarily have a great deal of science or technology in them, such as Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Fantastic book.
I haven't. I heard they made a movie of that, right?
They did, and it was really faithful to the book. And
I have to see it.
I would almost see it. I kind of include it in science fiction. Some people wouldn't, but it's very dystopian. Again, you've got alternate histories like The Man in the High Castle. I love that stuff. Roma Eternal, Robert Silverberg, one of my favorite books, as if the Roman Empire had never ended.
I've never read Philip K. Dick.
That'd be cool.
Oh, it's a great book, Roma Eternal.
Roma
if only
Eternal.
they weren't all brain damaged from the lead in their wine.
The only thing I could think of with a story that I could think of where Romans never got conquered or Romans never ended. Remember that Star Trek episode Bread and Circuses from the original series, where they go to another alternate Earth-like planet. They beam down. They meet a bunch of slaves who say they're followers of the sun. And so, of course, our heroes think they're worshiping, the literal sun. And then they get captured by Romans who kind of look like fascists, imagine Berlin, but with a whole bunch of, marble, very, very Roman-esque and stuff. And they still have gladiator games where they televise them all. Wouldn't you want to watch televised gladiator games and stuff,
Do you like movies about gladiators? Airplane. But yeah, Roma Eterna by Robert Silverberg is one of my favorite books, and it's the Roman Empire doesn't end, and it includes Jesus in it, Muhammad, and it comes up to the present day, and there's technology that's been invented since, and it's really great. I love alternative histories, and I love dystopian stuff, especially movies. A lot of my favorite movies are dystopian. But
how faithful? Because I know Man in the High Castle was like a single book. I don't think it was a really long book, and yet they made a 4-season Amazon series. I only saw the first 2 seasons. I thought they were pretty good.
In the High Castle goes nowhere near the majority of the stuff in the series. It really only ends when it ends at. I don't know if I want to give it away in case anyone wants to read it, but it ends at the point where the protagonist finally gets to the Man in the High Castle, to the actual High Castle, and that's where it ends. It doesn't resolve any of the stuff that's in the show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
To me, it's
one
not
of my favorite books.
Yeah, I'm not so big on the destination. It's really the journey. It's really for me. It's the journey.
About the journey.
So you can tell me, I knew how Star Trek 2 ended when I first saw the movie, but it was how it got there that was what I wanted to see. So
it is very much all about the journey. The book.
I've never read Philip K. Dick. Is he very technical in his details and stuff? Like equivalent to someone like, let's say, Stanislav Lem, who wrote Solaris, which I read. He can
be, but he's also extremely. He was like almost a new age writer, so that later period of sci-fi in the 60s and 70s where they really started to expand the subject matter. So you're going to get some metaphysical stuff. You're going to get some material about the nature of existence, and but still wrapped. He could still write straightforward sci-fi, hard sci-fi stories too. So he's a great man of great variety, and of course you've got Blade Runner comes out of.
Yeah, he has very interesting names for his stuff. Like Total Recall is was it We Sell It For You Wholesale? I think is the name of that, and of course Blade Runner is Do Androids Dream of Electronic Sheep?
Yeah, which is very different from the movies. The movies really have jazzed these up, which happens a lot, but still doesn't mean the original story isn't good. So just going to bring in another guest. It's one of the men's wrenches of our fellowship, just another Redshirt. How are you, my friend?
Very well, thanks. Hello, everybody.
What's up, Redshirt?
Hey, Redshirt.
How are you doing?
Do you know what fictional character's favorite book that is? From Earth to the Moon?
Janeway. I'm just guessing.
Well, it might be. I don't know, but Doc Brown. It's Doc Brown's favorite.
Oh, it's Doc
book.
Brown, right?
Yeah, he was a big Jules Verne fan and stuff.
And whilst there was at least one earlier Jules Verne, which I think was a Voyage in the Balloon or whatever. This was to me
Around the World in 80 Days.
Yeah, this was his first true science fiction effort, I think. And it was a seminal early science fiction work. And Jules Verne today is still readable.
Is this the earliest, the earliest concept of a rocket? Or did the concept of the rocket ship exist prior to this?
I think there was concepts before that, and there were certainly many, many earlier works where people traveled to other planets, usually by mystical means. I wouldn't be an expert on what they were, but certainly in Greek, even by as far back as Greek history, they were speculating on that. So
it might also be based on submarines.
Yes. Okay.
So because early submarines already existed and during the Civil War. So
yeah, just got to bring in quickly.
Also, wasn't World War I with the U-boats? That I thought that was where the earliest submarines came.
Well, I think
materialized.
From the Earth to the Moon was written.
Civil War earliest.
This was 1856 or something, 1858, round about then. So I'm just going to bring in another quick guest. This is my co-executive producer, honorary host. But he's privileged. He gets a clip.
That's popcorn.
Buttered popcorn.
Popcorn chicken, come on!
And just as I was about to introduce Darius Munchausen, he's buggered off. He's been having internet problems. So Jules Verne, very much seminal work, and could be seen as almost a hard sci-fi thing. It's about how do you get there? Descriptions of how it got there, the science and technology used. Another one I'm always a big fan of, particularly because he was a Scottish writer, was Robert Louis Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which was way back in the 1860s or 70s as well. And this was really focusing on, and we've all seen the Jerry Lewis movie where he's
the Nutty Professor. Professor. Yeah.
Yeah, so, which was based on this. And I actually like the cover of this because that's what some of the old buildings in Edinburgh look just like. And that's where he lived. I've been in his house in Edinburgh, in the new town of Edinburgh. But it's about a guy who can inhabit another, he can completely change his body, his personality, and do other things that his ordinary person can't do, which is a little bit of a fantasy for everybody. So some would place this in the science fiction genre. It could also be placed in horror. It could be placed in a number of places. I think it certainly influences.
I think this book predates what is it, Sigmund Freud and stuff. So you kind of wonder if Mr. Hyde's supposed to be a representation of his id.
Yes, and I think that's the point that the book is very much making, although not necessarily describing in those terms. It's the desire inside to show what he thinks is his real personality and who can do a lot of the things he can. Which we've seen in a number of things, right up to body swapping stuff and people being able to inhabit other bodies and pretend they're someone else. It's a common trope or theme.
In Star Trek's case, there was the episode "The Enemy Within," where Kirk was split into two beings. Like the transporter malfunctioned, and Kirk was split into two beings. One was more on the intellectual, positive side, and the other one was more of his id, where it was more of his negative, his survivalist instincts, his negativity, his strength. His strength to survive and stuff, and that kind of makes me think of Mr. Hyde as well.
Yeah, I think there's a very similar thread there, and I think that's why I wanted to just mention this. For me, is one of the seminal works. Is that these themes are repeated a lot, and it's a common human concern or fantasy, very often done with technological and scientific trappings in science fiction movies or TV or books.
Yeah, I think Jekyll and Hyde originally was viewed more as a horror story. If I remember correctly, and this is the book, he showed his manuscript after he'd written it to his wife, and she told him he had to burn it. So he did, but then he regretted it, and he sat down and rewrote the entire book.
Yeah, and corrected the mistakes that he'd made the first time.
Yeah.
You kind of wonder what he put in that first draft.
But
I'm going to add a little foreshadowing this time.
That's right. But Redshirt's right. There's a blurring of the lines in the very early days of what's science fiction, what's horror. But there's also been a thread throughout literature of the fear of science and the fear of what it can do and the negative consequences.
Does any of that predate World War One?
These all predate World
Well,
War
does
One
that fear of technology? Because generally the Victorians were all about technology was what's going to make, is going to improve society. They didn't. I don't think the Victorians
I'm sure
ever
there
saw
was
a
the debate even
technology.
back then.
I don't think they ever saw technology they didn't like.
Yeah, there was a lust for technology then in that era, but there were writers who feared too. But
like
another one
like Tolkien and stuff.
Yeah. There's another book I think is, although many people might not include sci-fi, I fit it into almost science fiction categories. Mark Twain, Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. First of all, it features time travel, but secondly, it features a lot of discussion about technology because he's introducing modern technology to the rubes.
Is this one of the earliest? Is this one of the earliest time travel stories? Because I know Mark Twain or Samuel Clemens was mid 19th century, I think, right?
This is 1870s maybe roundabout. I'm not sure. But
he was actually mostly after the Civil War. He wrote most of his stories.
And this is a definitive attempt to introduce time travel as a mechanism to tell a story. Which, yes, others had done it in more of a fantasy sense in older literature, but I think this was the first, for me, the first attempt to do it as I can travel through time, and this is what I'm going to do with that.
When did H.G. Wells' book, the Time Machine, get published?
Well, it was slightly after this.
Okay.
It was a little bit after, and that's my other final entry in this, because there's 100 different things you could pick, but my final entry would be the Time Machine as a seminal work, and H.G. Wells, a writer you can still read today and still reads well. Not dated in particularly. His writing style is very modern and very much based in science. Here's a machine. This is how the guy constructed it. This is what he's going to do with it. And the dystopian element to it, too, of course. Alternative history element.
Yeah, a lot of, from what I gather, a lot of H.G. Wells stuff is very, how do I say it? It's very caution. Like a lot of his stories are cautionary tales, almost. Like what I'm thinking of in particular is the War of the Worlds and stuff.
Yeah, and this is why it's possible. Apart from Jules Verne, he is the first true science fiction author because the majority of his work was concerned with what we would call today common science fiction themes: alien invasion, time travel. Lots of stuff about the future, potential futures. So
he's more cynical than, let's say, someone like Jules Verne or something.
Yeah, Jules Verne still had that fantasy element of, like if you look at the Mealy Brothers silent movies that they made of his stuff, that's kind of how he was portraying it in the books. This is much more hard science fiction.
So to me, H.G. Wells is basically would be the Dr. McCoy to like Jules Verne's Spock, Where Spock is, more optimistic about the science approach and stuff, and McCoy will always talk about the implications of what could happen and stuff.
Yeah, and I've got a lifelong passion for time travel, so.
I hope you guys aren't annoyed that I'm using a lot of Star Trek terms to make my points and stuff.
No, because I think unlike the Captain and I and Redshirt, you guys are you're translating for a younger generation. So, Redshirt, my friend, thank you for joining, because I know you have to do some work on this day. What's your earliest memories of science fiction and reading and watching stuff, and what did it mean to you? How did you get into it?
In grade school, we had a small library at the school I attended from 3rd through 6th grade. And I think I read every single science fiction book and every single biography that was in that library in the years that I was there. My earliest memory of a science fiction story is the Heinlein Juveniles. So, have spacesuit will travel, Podcane of Mars.
Yeah, I read those. Yeah,
and they were, and I reread one or two of them not too long ago, and they're not dumbed down for kids to read. They're just simpler themes. There's not as much going on. There's there's one or two major themes in the story, and it tells a really good story. So that helps get kids want to read it. But those are the first, and that once I started reading those, I never looked back. I kept going with science fiction all the way through the 70s. I was in the science fiction book club, and devoured everything I could find at the library and bought a lot of them. So it's for me, it's been since I was 8 or 9 years old. I started on science fiction and fantasy, and never stopped.
Cool. Yeah, I think you're probably similar experiences to me from a reading perspective, because I started with some of that stuff too. Now you mentioned those Heinlein books, and James Blish wrote some similar books that were not necessarily aimed at children, but were almost children building their own spacecraft type stuff.
Right.
And which leaked oxygen bottles to supply the air and so on. Archer Collin mentions, not SF related, but he noticed the book of one of my favorite history series, Top Center. I think he's referring to I, Claudius, that magnificent series, magnificent books and magnificent series.
I saw the series. It's really, really good. Like George R. R. Martin stole all the King's Landing storyline from I, Claudius.
Yeah.
Like Ned Stark is basically Sejanus.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you look at the BBC filmed that on like 3 sets, very little exterior work, if any, that I can recall, and it's just the quality of the writing and the acting. I mean, Brian Blessed, Derek Jacobi, John Hurt, just unbelievable great acting. That's one of my all-time favorite books and shows. Definitely, I have the Blu-rays. But
I want to read the book now.
Oh, the book's great, and there's a second one. There was more than I think it followed up with a second one, Claudius the God, or I think it was called. But yeah, great, and it really is a great insight into Roman history. Yes, it's a drama, but Claudius wasn't the fool that they made him out to be, as you saw in the show, of course.
Yeah, Claudius was basically, to me, he was Tyrion from Game of Thrones. Like Tyrion was based off of Claudius,
and he was the survivor. He was a survivor, Yep. And I've always had this lifelong fascination with Roman history, which is why I like Roman stuff that's incorporated in science fiction as well. So yeah, that's a little bit of stuff about the history. I mean, it's hard to define what science fiction is, but I think we had a fair stab at a few examples of it there. But what about the seminal works that you guys are into that you perhaps, if you were to pick 2 or 3, would be, these are my favorites? I was thinking of books originally, but it doesn't have to be. So who wants to kick off with some suggestions?
I'm not sure what you mean.
So something you would say that was, for you, these are the 3 most important works to me of science fiction, and this is why. This is what they mean to me.
Oh, sure. I can start.
Yeah, just personalize it. I mean, it's just we're just having
I think the first obvious one to me will be, since I've been talking about quite a bit, Star Trek has always been something that's been very important to me. Just the type of stories that the stories that they tell, beginning, middle, and end, that usually basically have a crew that work together. And despite the fact that they work together, are also friends, which is not always an easy thing to do, especially in the workplace. So, but they're out there together, and they're trying to set a prime example of the best of humanity and stuff in a universe where we have managed to solve 99% of our problems and stuff. And we're out there helping and building relationships with other races and stuff. And when I was a kid, I had a hard time building relationships with my peers and stuff. So seeing this on the screen gave me, just told me that there are people out there that you can build relationships with. So, and it's just that human element and stuff always really meant a lot to me. And of course, the epic music. Besides the storytelling, the music was great in the shows as well and stuff. But yeah, Star Trek is definitely one of them.
Did you find, like me, that, for me, until Star Wars came out, nobody I knew wanted to have anything to do with science fiction at school? I was the only one that was into
Yeah,
any of that stuff
it was
until
it was-
Star Wars. Then they were all into science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I had classmates. None of my classmates liked Star Trek. Everybody knew I liked Star Trek. I didn't keep that a secret. In the '90s, I went to Lutheran school and stuff in the '90s. So no, I didn't have to worry about being bullied or anything like that. Because I know in the '70s, like from other YouTubers who were growing up in the '70s and '80s and stuff, you did not tell anybody that you watched Star Trek or you'd get bullied. You'd get bullied at school, get bullied after school and stuff. So, but Star Wars, yeah, everybody likes Star Wars. Star Wars is like every other person likes Star Wars. Star Trek is way more niche and way more. It. You have to really, if you don't connect with it, then you're not going to like it. And it's really something for people that have been through life's ringer and stuff, and can appreciate what it's trying to say and stuff. So.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff, mate. Yeah, I mean, Star Trek has been pretty seminal for all of us. Seminal being influential at a basic level. I think Redshirt will correct my description of that word. But
it's brought. I mean, between the storytelling and the stuff that they talk about in the shows, or they show in the shows, like it makes you want to read the classics. Like, I mean, you watch Wrath of Khan, they quote directly Tale of Two Cities, on Kirk's end, and on Khan's end they quote Moby Dick. And I read Tale of Two Cities, which is a brilliant Charles Dickens story. I haven't read Moby Dick, so I have to read Moby Dick just so that I could just quote Khan. I could just read it with Ricardo Montalban's voice and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, the name of my screen right there is the Admiral, because the way Ricardo Montalban said it, and he says it with such anger and jealousy of Kirk.
That's right. I'd just like to say hello to some people who've joined the chat. Some of our great friends, Purple Valkyrie. Good to see you, lass. The wonderful Snow Dub. How are you, buddy? Thanks for joining. It's really nice to have you guys coming in to take part in my streams. Thank you very much. Kai, my friend, what would you say were your most influential science fiction works?
Definitely Star Trek and Babylon 5.
Yeah, would you say there's a school of thought, and it's a raging debate, that some people say Babylon 5 was actually the better show?
That's a hard one, because I love both Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine.
Throws grenade in, walks away.
Yeah, and also I have some gripes with Babylon 5 here and there, but some of those gripes I'm like, I try to be understanding, because I don't know what exactly he was wanting. I know some of what he was wanting to do, and some of what he had to do because of UPN going down and no one was buying the show, and he's like, I need to wrap some of this story for people, and so they made the movies and whatnot. Like, it had production and story issues because of that. Whereas DS9 had no such thing. They were Star Trek, so they just had a budget and they were going, and that was it. Like, you're going until you're done with your seasons, and then.
Did you know that J. Michael Straczynski went to Paramount and pitched the show and gave them his Bible? He already had a Bible written when he pitched the show, and he gave it to them, and then they didn't call back. They didn't call him back for like 4 months. They're like, oh, we're not going to do it and stuff. So I think they kind of took some ideas from his Bible, and that's how that's what went into the creation of Deep Space Nine. Now, I still love Deep Space Nine.
I've heard that before, but I don't think it lines up with the timeline of production, because Deep Space Nine had Roddenberry's blessing before he died. So they already had that show concepted out in the late 80s, early 90s. It started, when did TNG start?
There's too many similarities. There's too many similarities to be coincidental. That's kind of why I feel that way.
Those similarities are I don't see them. I think the way I see things, there's kind of like a common psychic zeitgeist with humanity, like the collective unconscious, like Jung calls it, And I think that we see a lot of similar things pop up in different places at similar times. Like what's it called? I've had ideas that I see pop up somewhere else. Oh, someone's already on that. Or like with Firefly, how people say, "Oh, you copied this anime," and he says, "What are you talking?" It was Outlaw Star, I think it was, and he was like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't watch anime." And they showed him this scene from Outlaw Star where like that's exactly like in Firefly, but he like they had no association. It was just something that happened within like a decade of each other or so.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible
I
for
remember right.
ideas. There
2
are
decades.
multiple threads and ideas that could be repeated on several shows independently or in several books, because that's the nature of it. I think. I mean, there's time travel. There's 500 authors have written time travel stories, some of which are very similar. You know, you do get repeating themes, and there are themes and tropes in science fiction that repeat. Time travel is definitely one. Dystopia, alternative universes, body
I feel
inhabiting other bodies. Space opera, war is huge. I'm a big fan of space operas, of war, military science fiction. So Starship Troopers being one, and then a lifelong love of stuff following on from that. And there's probably 50. Well, the Forever War is Joe Haldeman. Is another apex book of that. If you've never read the Forever War, you're missing out. It's got time travel, relativistic time travel, and great military action. it's got both.
To credit for what Nerdporeal Lifeform was saying and what you're saying, 70s rock fan, like what Nerdporeal Lifeform is talking about with the similarities are like kind of very specific, but in terms of the themes that both shows are attempting to tackle, they're both trying to hit exactly the same themes. So that's why I'm not surprised to see them have a lot of similarities because
you can't
of the
avoid
storytelling, the needs for that.
Yeah, you cannot avoid some of the basic themes of humanity and what it means to be or human or indeed any individual conscious being, because there's aliens in these too. I don't think those themes can be avoided.
Because the other reason why I feel that way is because DS9 is a very different type of story. Whereas, Star Trek was generally, it's episodic. It's you go off into space on a starship and you go off to space on a starship and you either explore strange new worlds and you do all that stuff. Whereas Deep Space Nine is very, you're it's like you're settled in one place and people are coming and going and whatever stories that come in through that lens and stuff. So that's kind of the other reason why I feel that they went in that direction was because of J. Michael Straczynski's Bible. Now I'm not saying they directly copied. I mean there were ideas that there were ideas that kind of helped create Deep Space Nine, like you said. It's basically how a lot of times stuff gets leaked, and other creators get winds of what other people are doing, and they come up with their own takes on it. So that's kind of so. What Kai? So what you're saying is kind of I agree. I agree with what you're going for and stuff.
Well, you look at a universe or a galaxy that's been set up to have perhaps, say, 2 or 3 warring races with some kind of incipient galactic empire, lots of big ships fighting each other. That's a pretty common theme, and it's very difficult to distinguish one of those from the other. At the end of the day, there's a lot of generic ones like that. It takes something truly special. They elevate that and still make it use those themes and still make it special. So
both of them tried to discuss humanity and life and our connection to the past and the future and everything in like really different ways, but the physical pieces on the board were very similar.
Yeah. I just want to touch on a couple of things in the chat, and thank you everybody for being here and watching this. I know we're competing with Gary Neurotic these days since he's moved his time slot for his nooner. So thank you for joining us. What I resent, one man show, what I resented most about Star Trek was the way they would introduce a concept in one show and then just drop it. I think that's true of the original series because of the episodic nature of television then. I think probably less true of the follow-on shows like TNG and DS9. I think they did have overarching story arcs and themes and recurring characters, so I think that was less like that later.
That was something that I feel like that was something that it was more tied to Roddenberry. And so while Roddenberry was alive, it was very much like that. Like season 1 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, for example, is very much like the original series in its pacing and its you know, how it does things. But then as Roddenberry got sick and got less involved, and the other writers started taking more ownership of it, they started expanding on races, on characters, on the world. And so yeah, it became less like that. And then with DS9 and Voyager, you see like a really hard contrast of Voyager being very traditional Star Trek and DS9 going off on its own in its own direction.
Yeah, it was really, you're talking about like season 3 is really where TNG really takes off, and that's because they got a new head writer, Michael Piller. And Michael Piller,
Had to take
basically,
over.
he was super duper strict on scripts. So like, you know, I was listening to I was watching the episode Sins of the Father from season 3, and Ronald D. Moore wrote that, and he wrote a version of that, and Michael Piller completely destroyed his script and stuff with, you know, marks saying, you know, this has to be better, this has to be better, this has to be better. So he really pushed the writing staff to basically do better and stuff, and they decided to take chances and they went with multi-season story arcs, and then
I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and that translates, that helped translate to Deep Space Nine. So Michael Piller basically went on to be the head writer for Deep Space Nine until Ira Steven Behr took over. And then with Voyager, it was basically Rick Berman and Jerry Taylor, and they made it basically TNG Light. So it was basically Next Generation, but in the Delta Quadrant. So,
well, in many ways, it was not only that; there were some elements of the original series tied in there, because they were going to a new place that was completely unexplored, just like just like the original series. Whereas the Next Generation, they had already been to a lot of the places. They were still going to new places, but you know, in the original series, they were going places nobody had gone, and I think that was one area they kind of combined the two series into one to make Voyager, and I think that's probably what brought on some inconsistencies in it to begin with.
So I think we can all agree on the importance of Star Trek to science fiction, particularly popularization. But Captain, at the risk of having more Star Trek, what would be some of your other influences or great works, particularly published works, that you would say you'd stuck with you over the years?
Oh man! See, I have, like I said, I have a ton of Star Trek books. There are ones I have not read in 20 years. I could probably pick up again and read through it like it was the first time, and that's why, you know, even though I do have a few Star Wars books, even though the Star Trek books, I even have Quantum Leap books. That's what I love. I just love the science fiction aspect of it, where I can read along and I can hear the voices of the characters as I read. I can hear Spock as I'm reading along. I can hear Kirk. I can hear whoever, and it just brings me into it, where I can experience the story that I can't actually see, but in my mind I can.
Yeah. Well, that's actually quite a powerful thing to be able to do that. Yes, because if you're reading original work, you're going to create that voice in your head yourself. So yeah, is there anything outside of those televised works that you've particularly enjoyed over the years?
Oh gosh,
In terms of books or authors that you may have read in the genre.
You know, unfortunately, when I moved, I lost about half my collection.
I know that feeling. It's disappeared into an alternative universe.
Exactly.
Slipped sideways.
That sucks, dude.
Yeah, Redshirt, my friend. I know you've got a few suggestions. What would you say were the seminal works that have stuck with you through your life in the genre?
Yeah.
Why?
The first one is probably not going to be very familiar to a lot of people. I just picked it up as a paperback, and it blew me away. It's the book is called Under Pressure, written by Frank Herbert.
Oh,
and
Frank Herbert.
And it's military science fiction in that in a future where oil is extremely scarce, this one, I don't know whether it was the U.S., it's been that long, Navy is sending submarines to tap the oil pipeline of another country. And they tow these enormous long trains of bladders that they fill up at the pipeline, and then they have to sneak back and deliver it back to their country, and they start losing subs, and they're not sure why. So the Navy brass decide
Sounds like my channel, sorry.
Yeah. They decide to put a psychologist on board the next sub going out, and it's all about how he's trying to fit in and be part of the crew without blowing his cover, but the crew are all suspicious of him because he doesn't seem to have much experience in submarines, which rings very true to me. Submariners are they consider themselves to be almost a separate service because of all of the things they have to learn about a submarine. And every man has to be able to do a job pretty much because the difference is life and death. His evaluation of the sub crew is the most surprising part the book, and it made me think about, one, it introduced me to military science fiction, and two, it made me start to think about, is sanity related to your circumstances? Can you be put into a situation where a normal person is effectively insane, and a person adapted to that situation would be considered insane in normal society?
Oh, there's a touch of the Kafka-esque about that.
But that really, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting basically, this is going to be about submarines and Cold War and that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, it has this huge psychological twist at the end, which I thought was a great ending to the book. So that really stuck with me.
It's interesting you should mention Frank Herbert because he did write other works other than Dune. So
yes, yeah. In fact, it was long after I read Under Pressure that I read Dune. The second one is one that really changed my outlook on society, the world, and government. Society, individuals, government, politics. There is Starship Troopers, which I read at a fairly early age, but the one that really hit me between the eyes was Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which is probably even more overtly political than Starship Troopers is.
Yes, and that was one of my earliest reads as well.
Yeah. And that's basically introduced me to libertarianism. I didn't get introduced to libertarianism through Ayn Rand. I got it through Robert Heinlein.
Me too. That's Starship Troopers. That was an eye-opener for me as a 10-year-old whenever I read it. It was I hadn't thought of things this way.
Yeah, exactly. And that changed the way I was thinking. So when I read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, since I'd already read Starship Troopers, I was ready for somebody who was going to say, we're going to build a coalition of libertarians, socialists, and you name it, because, gentlemen, we're either going to hang together or we're going to hang separately. Yeah. And there's very much,
some of those themes in Stranger in a Strange Land as well, albeit there's a little more in that mixed in, and it's a little more flowery in its prose, but there's some themes in there too around that about freedom and so on, individuality.
I think that The Moon is a Harsh Mistress should be required reading in high schools. I can think of 3 or 4 books they could throw out and replace.
That's what I used to say about Starship Troopers. When I did an essay about it in high school, I didn't get very good marks, even though it was a brilliant essay in my opinion, because I don't think the teacher was sympathetic.
No,
early wokeness there, but because I was
praising what did you say about authority, you little punk.
That's right. I was praising the social structure in it heavily, and I don't think she appreciated that. So.
Well, Heinlein started out as a socialist. I said this in the chat. Started out as a socialist and moved away from collectivism after he got out of the Navy and started writing. And I think the left never forgave him for being an apostate. I think that's
right.
That's part of the animus towards Heinlein and his
He could never
books.
leave the cult.
That's right. And he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other one, and I know you're going to get a grin out of this, is Larry Niven's Ringworld. Now, I read it when I was too young. I got overwhelmed the first time I read it. I was probably in junior high school. And there is so much science, so much detail. The scope is, hard to imagine. You're talking about a ring was with a radius of about 90 million miles. It's essentially a ring built into Earth's orbit all the way around. And then some very esoteric creatures, that are in that. Even the human being in that isn't particularly recognizable to a modern person. And so I kind of got lost. And after I graduated from college, I had a degree in physics. I went back and reread it and was absolutely blown away, because now I was old enough, mature enough, and had enough knowledge to be able to appreciate what the world Niven built in that book. And I've read a bunch of his other stuff because of that book. And it made me a lifelong fan of hard science fiction.
Yes, indeed. I think you've similar concept to me. I don't want to bore you guys with a ton of stuff about what I love, but it is my show, so screw you. I mean, but I'll just share a couple of things, I guess, that for me were the seminal works. And there's 1,000. I mean, there's 1,000 things I could pick, but I would always come back to these ones. First of all, E. Doc Smith's Lensman series, the prototype space opera with massive... I don't know how the guy could write all these books, because he ran out of adjectives. Because the spaceships got bigger in every book, and the destruction they wrought got bigger and on a bigger scale, and the mental powers got bigger, and how he kept going with the adjectives, I don't know. But I loved these books. They were just full of massive planet-sized explosions and titanic mental struggles. Very much prototype. Very much read like what they were, which was written in the 30s and 40s. But every space opera owes a debt to the Lensman series, I believe.
When there was a clip or interview of George Lucas, like he's about to, it's the interview where he's about to start writing Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Yeah. And they show his office and they show his his bookshelf, and this was I noticed E. Doc Smith's name in the Lensman books were on his shelf, and I think Star Wars owes a lot to not only Flash Gordon and all the serials that came out in the 30s and 40s, but also these books too.
Oh, absolutely. I think Lucas does owe a debt. Star Wars does owe a debt to these. And I think the thing about these, as opposed to the Flash Gordons and Buck Rogers, is that they were, and I love the Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, whatever, but they were very much more juvenile serials. This guy was attempting to write a real book about a massive galactic empire with huge fights with aliens and whatever. So I think he as I say, dated slightly, but still a thumping good read.
So this is a very I'm curious, because I haven't read this and I do want to read it. I bought the first book on my Kindle. Is it very detailed? Like there's like you said he runs out of adjectives and stuff.
Yes, in a sense, because he has to outdo himself every time the battles get bigger and the mental powers of the warring aliens get bigger.
So is there a lot of character dialogue, or is it kind of told from an outside perspective?
No, it's character. There's a lot of character dialogue. There are certain main characters, and it depends, because the first book may not be the first book. It may be the first book chronologically, or the first book he wrote, because he went back and did a couple of prequels, and some of the major characters weren't introduced till the second or third book, and then Kim
I'm assuming
Kinnison.
there's
Kim
okay.
Kinnison, for instance, is the major Earth lensman. But yeah,
I'm assuming there's
there's
larger than life villains too in this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But each set, it's like climbing a hill. You never know when you've got to the top. You defeat one set of villains, and it suddenly turns out they were the puppets of the set above them.
Sounds like an anime. Now it sounds like an anime type of story.
Well, you could absolutely animate this, and I think it might be the only way you could make it because it's so big. Yeah, it would cost like $5,000 trillion to make it if you did it properly. But
I love it when stories do that.
Yeah, but he basically...
Well, there is an anime. There is an anime of Lensman, actually.
There is, yes.
From the 80s.
It's the only way you could properly do it. But yeah, a lot of the themes in this you'll see in every other space opera since. So,
I got a review from Australia that compared my world building to E.E. Doc Smith, so I wrote that one down so I could check them out later.
Yeah, you should at least read the cliff notes.
I'll read it.
Because if you start reading the books, you'll get dragged down an alleyway of galactic explosions and alien universes.
Well, I have a war to write for the next one, so.
Well, indeed. So read E. Doc Smith, and you'll get every adjective that's ever been invented, and a few new ones that you've never heard of. Ray Bradbury has always been a huge writer for me, and Fahrenheit 451 is possibly my favorite, and it's an absolute, like 1984 is often cited. Fahrenheit 451 is just as frightening.
I call this the
paper burns.
Yeah, I call this the book burning dystopian book. I've never read this one. I just know that there's book burnings, and it takes place in a totalitarian dystopia.
Yeah, and of course, the firemen in the book are the ones burning the books. That's why they're called the firemen. They don't go to put out fires; they go to start fires.
Yes.
So it's a salutary lesson of what, and people are actually burning books now.
Mm-hmm.
In universities and libraries, they're taking them out the back and burning them because they're problematic. Read this book, and you'll see why it's a bad idea.
Yep.
It's a gripping book. I mean, I do love Ray Bradbury in general, but this should be up there with 1984, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Greg Bear's Eon.
That looks like a video game. That looks like a video game cover.
Well, this cover is possibly, but yeah, it's a stunning, extremely deep, physics detailed novel about an alien, and it shares similarities with another book I'm going to talk about, where basically this rock that comes into Earth's orbit is the terminal or one end of a universe spanning tunnel, which takes you into multiple universes, and it's very difficult to describe anything else about it because the scale is so huge, and there was a number of follow-up books, but it's written in the 80s, possibly the best book of that era, possibly the best modern science fiction book I've enjoyed, and I call the 80s modern. It's a real detailed physics-based book as well, so. Total revelation to humans, and they now have to go and figure out who built this thing, what they're using it for, and there are threats involved.
I had a comment earlier that you just reminded me of because I forgot what it was, but you said it deals with like real physics and stuff. Earlier, when I think Nerdporeal mentioned hard sci-fi, his first hard sci-fi. The first time I heard of that genre was when I was looking at what genres to place my book in, like on Amazon. I said, "What's hard sci-fi?" And I read the description. And it's like it tries to be accurate to science. I said, "Oh, well, that's a moving target." Okay.
Well, to me, it basically, it's like the way it depicts space. It's just a very shallow meaning to me, but it's basically if it depicts space in a more realistic, light, and the physics is more, believable, or the physics is more based in reality, then I consider it hard science fiction. Yeah. It's like 2001. I consider hard science fiction.
Okay. It is. This is not like that because it's speculating about quantum physics and wormholes and the ability to travel into other other universes through that. So it's basically suggesting that these things may be possible, and this is how it would be done but it's all very much unachievable today. And there's bad aliens and nasty people, and there are threats. Galactic
There are
threats.
threats.
I mentioned earlier the Forever War. Next to Starship Troopers, to me, the second greatest, possibly even the greatest military sci-fi ever written. Bunch of grunts, war with an unknown set of aliens, Earth just starting to move out into the galaxy as a spacefaring race. And I love the fact that they have to travel vast distances to fight these aliens. By the time they come back to Earth, every time society has moved on by thousands of years. And they have to adjust to that. It's just hilarious. It's gripping. The characters are great. You really feel for the main guy in it, because eventually he's the only one left. Nobody, the Earth he comes back to has no relationship to the one he left. And the descriptions of the battles with the aliens, though, are fantastic. Until everyone realizes, well, maybe that was a big mistake. So if you've never read The Forever War, it is a stone cold classic. Rendezvous with Rama, also strange artificial, comes into the into Earth space, and they launch an expedition to get inside it. Big cylinder, fully contained, self-contained world within, but no sign of any builder or aliens, and it travels on out through through the solar system and gone. And it's really about the expedition to get inside it and what they find. Gripping stuff. Probably more hard sci-fi, because they're not necessarily, I mean, the mission to Earth is not some super advanced race. They were able to send shuttles up there and get teams inside, but the description of the artificial world inside and the size of it is just gripping stuff.
It rivals, yeah, the descriptions of Rama that Clark wrote in this book rival Niven's Ringworld.
Absolutely.
Or something on a scale wrapping itself around what you're seeing.
And there's been consistent talk of trying to make a movie. I think they're moving ahead with it finally. I know Morgan Freeman holds the rights to it for some reason.
Wow.
They're finally talking, because this is movie fodder. This would be a brilliant movie. Just the way he describes the world of Rama inside the book is just incredible and detailed, very detailed.
Yep.
And of course, there's rival groups wanting to explore this thing. Ringworld, we mentioned. Larry Niven, great writer, and this is a fantastic megastructure. Megastructure's great trope and theme in sci-fi, and this is my favorite one of those. There's a lot in it, but Redshirt talked about that. Another one, Arthur, I love, Harry Harrison's Stainless Steel Rat. Again, this has been crying out for a TV show or a movie for decades.
Is that the name of the ship, the Stainless Steel Rat?
It's the name of the character in the book, the main character, who is a cosmic villain, but in terms of, he's like a thief. So he's like a rat inside he describes himself as a rat inside the steel and concrete corridors of all these alien Earth colonies and Earth, who can slip inside, like going into the vents, and he steals things.
So instead of the Pink Panther, he's a stainless steel rat.
Kind of, and he kind of gets, but he's almost like a thief-like version of a James Bond. And eventually he gets caught up in that kind of stuff, and he's kind of recruited to work for the authorities.
Oh,
okay. But the humor in this is one of my favorite parts. It is funny.
Okay. Harry Harrison's one of the great comic science fiction writers.
This sounds like an anime that I've seen. I mean, it's not science fiction, but it sounds like an anime I've seen called Lupin the Third. It's an old anime from the 70s. Yep, Lupin
I love
the Third.
Lupin the Third.
Yeah,
it's similar. He's a thief, and it's like it's got a very James Bond type of scope and stuff. It's funny, and it's ridiculous.
He's got all the gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's got gadgets. Yep.
Yeah. And he can escape from any situation. He's also a great master manipulator of people.
Yes.
Like he can put on front. He's got so much front. It's incredible. You know, he can walk his way into anything. It's just and it's funny. He's very
Can he
funny.
manipulate any woman to do whatever he wants, basically?
All apart from one, which makes up a huge part of the stories.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Slippery Jim degrees.
You should check out Lupin the Third. It's an anime.
And they actually made not a cartoon. There's graphic novels of these as well, which I've got. But yeah, it's great. Harry Harrison's one of my favorite writers. He's written so much good stuff over the years. A lot of it very humorous.
I need to write all this down. I really need to write all this down and read all these now.
Well, I think Redshirt might correct me. He wrote Make Room, Make Room. Make Room,
I believe
Make Room,
he did.
which became Soylent Green, the movie Soylent Green with Charlton Heston. So he could write serious stuff too. So that was a very dystopian book. But
the closest thing I've read to Harrison's stainless steel rat stories is the Retief stories.
Yes,
about the intergalactic diplomat.
I got those on my list.
They are fantastic, and the author of those was actually worked in the State Department in the 60s. He was in the Foreign Service, and he was lampooning diplomats in the books. And apparently his books were extremely popular in the U.S. State Department, but to be caught reading one would get you fired. They were considered subversive.
Indeed. Yeah, I'm definitely they're on the list. Yeah, so actually going back to the Lensmen, the Arissians and Edorians are the good guys and the bad guys in alien terms in the Lensman series. So Starship Troopers we've talked about, again, an absolute groundbreaking book, not just because of its description of military space wars, but the politics contained within, and very libertarian. And if you haven't read it, it's a stunning read even today. The movie's great, but it's very different. Andromeda Strain. I'm a big Michael Crichton fan, and this is very much hard sci-fi, which made it a great movie as well. I'm a big fan of that. And it's about a virus that may kill everybody on the planet. So
isn't it very relevant? Wouldn't this be a really relevant type of story?
It is very relevant, and although I think in this book it's an accidental release of a virus, I'm not quite sure whether it was deliberately created that way. But yeah, well worth it. Michael Crichton's always good because of Jurassic Park and various other things that he wrote. Westworld.
Yeah, it was interesting. Westworld wasn't a book he wrote; it was a movie he wrote. So
yeah, and he ended up directing these things when he had no experience making films whatsoever. But because he wrote the books, they said, you can direct it as well. So he didn't know what he was doing, but it worked.
Yeah, that didn't quite work out for Stephen King when he directed stuff.
No, it didn't. Man in the High Castle, Philip K. Dick. I mean, a tremendous writer, very imaginative. A lot of groundbreaking stuff. Man in the High Castle, alternative universe story where the Germans and Japanese win World War II and they split America up between them with the no man's land in the middle in the Midwest. And the book is really about certain characters who hear about these films which show the Germans losing the war, and this man in the high castle that's supposed to know the answers, and they have to try and find him. Brilliantly written. It's very character driven. Very little hard sci-fi, in a sense, but it's very much an alternative universe story. But the implication is that our universe, our Earth that we live in, exists too. This is a different one, but they can see evidence that ours and that the Nazis lost in ours. So. And they want to know how that happened and how can they change things in their world. So there's a lot of themes kind of subtly woven into that. A couple more. Philip Jose Farmer, Riverworld Saga. To Your Scattered Bodies Go was the first. I mean, Philip Jose Farmer is a fantastic writer, but this is basically a book where everyone that's ever existed on the planet Earth wakes up one day naked on the banks of a giant world-spanning river, and it contains everyone that has ever died. Historical characters. So Mark Twain, Sam Clemens is in this. Hermann Goring's in it. all sorts of historical people feature as well as the fictional. In fact, the main character in it is Richard Burton, but not the actor, the English explorer from the 19th century. So it's got real human protagonists thrown into these roles, and some of them are trying to find out who did this. Burton particularly woke up before this happens, before they all wake up, in a gigantic room where all these half-formed bodies are. So someone is trying to tell him who's doing this and why. So it's a massive in scope, but the fact that I love about this is he introduces real people like Hermann Goering and whoever that you can then ascribe motivations to within the story, and they're interacting with unknown characters, like unknown humans. It's just a fantastic saga. I think you've read it, Redshirt.
I had a long time ago.
Yeah, brilliant book. I'll always go back to this. I've read it about a dozen times. Massive in scope. And I guess if I was to one more, and a guy who's possibly my favourite author of all time, Robert Silverberg, up the line is time travel but done as tourism. So they invented time travel, and pretty much all they use it for is academic research and taking tourists back to the past. Again, there's a comedic element to this one, but there's a guy who becomes a time travel courier just so he can go back and sleep with all his relatives from the past, because that's his thing. And there's another one.
What?
And there's others that've got motivations to make money, and there's others that just want to set themselves up as lords in the past, and so all these things are happening with these, but there's a time travel police are trying to stop it. So it's a very, very interesting book because it's full of paradoxes, because if anything goes wrong, they have to keep jumping back in time to try and fix it, and things do end up going wrong, badly wrong. So it's quite hilarious in that sense. They're also half serious, but it's definitely my favourite time travel story. Silverberg is a great writer. He wrote in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and wrote some of my favourite books like The Masks of Time.
What was the name of that Arthur C. Clarke one that you were talking about earlier? I'm writing them all down now. Writing all the books down that you were talking about.
So Rendezvous with Rama.
Rendezvous with Rama, okay.
Yeah, it's possibly next to 2001 is the one he's known for most, although Childhood's End would be another major one. You might have seen the TV adaptation of that a few years ago.
His
Clarke
first masterpiece since 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah. So yeah, these are my. I mean, there's hundreds more, and I didn't want to bore everybody with these, but to me, they contain almost within all of these ones I've got. They contain almost all of the themes that make up science fiction. There's dystopia, there's hard sci-fi, there's aliens, there's alternative universes, there's comedy, comic stuff, which is just like the Stainless Steel Rat, which isn't really trying to make any points. It's just having some fun. Military sci-fi, they're all in here.
There's one theme that I wrote a term paper on in high school for a science fiction English class, which is essentially how will humans evolve in the future if we're no longer allowing natural selection, because having a civilization essentially reduces the impact of natural selection on a species like the human beings. We protect the weak people. We protect the people who 2,000 years ago might not have survived.
That is
and
right.
2001 is one of the books that I used for that, given that essentially that's the obelisk, the
it's the beginning.
The black stones, standing stones, are basically artifacts of an alien race that is essentially trying to guide human evolution. And another one I did was Clifford Simak's. I forget what's it called? Childhood's End.
No, Childhood's End is Arthur C. Clarke, but I think I know the book you're reaching for.
You have all of the people are gone from Earth. All that's left are intelligent dogs that were augmented.
Oh yeah, I've read that.
And humans have evolved. Some humans decided to get modified so that they could live on Jupiter, swimming in the gas of the gas giant type of thing. And pretty much all of humanity has abandoned Earth to be modified to live on alien worlds, and the dogs
Do they all miss the humans?
Yeah, humans. They tell the
No,
stories
no.
of the humans.
Yeah, they miss them.
Oh, they do miss the humans.
They do.
Yeah, they do. They do. The dogs miss
They're
human
such
beings.
good
They
boys.
wish that
There's a
they wish
touch
that
of-
not all of them had left.
There's a touch of a boy and his dog in that, with the
Yeah.
dog with the mental powers. It's been, yeah.
So sweet.
Yeah, after you told me about that, I watched it. I watched A Boy and His Dog right away. I was surprised. A Boy and His Dog sounds like a very, very innocent movie, but it's
does,
not.
doesn't it? It's like a Disney
It's
live
not.
action. No.
Yeah, it's not. No, I mean it paved the way for like the Road Warrior. I think. Mad Max 2.
To me, it's the forerunner of the Road Warrior. It's a similar society, although not so many car chases. But
When it comes, I wanted to add something about evolution. Like in 2001, I think really like the next step for evolution of mankind is we have to go venture out into space. Now, whether we live in outer space stuff like on a space station or something, or we live on a moon, or we live on a planet, we're going to be different regardless. I mean, we're gonna change with the environments that we're in. So if we go to a planet, I mean, there's going to be very slim chances of us surviving, because if it's life like this, it's going to have totally different organisms, microorganisms that we have absolutely no immunity to. So it would be a very gradual process, but we would learn. But like here, I believe we could adapt and stuff, but we'd be different. And I think really going out into space and going, spraying into the universe is our next step of evolution. And I mean, even anime sci-fi like Gundam really goes into the psychological or the psionic element, where you can, if you're in space and you're fighting in space, like you will be able to somehow read your opponent really easily, and you'll develop like this sixth sense of intuition of when they're going to be firing at you and stuff. So yeah, I mean it's a very interesting discussion to have.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, good one. Good points. Just a couple of quick things in the chat. John Scalzi's Old Man's War series. I do love Old Man's War. I've got a real thing against Scalzi these days because he's an ass. And he's just doing to science fiction what they did to gaming and now they're doing to movies and whatever. But Old Man's War is a classic. I'll give him that. Very, very good book indeed. So what I wanted to do is we're going to have to head towards wrapping it up. We've barely scratched the surface of science fiction, I have to say. But we're probably
there's really a lot to talk about.
Yeah, but 2 hours, we've done a pretty damn good job. There was, what to say, Lord Thoth. We watched that film last night too, Dog with Channing Tatum. Very heartwarming. I did promise. Well, actually, there's something I did want to talk about just slightly before we wrap up. Is I know that I got to share this screen. Sorry. So I'd just like to say a quick word about William Hurt, who was a very versatile actor, obviously sadly passed away at a very young age, almost made it 72, 71, but one of my favourite movies of all time is Dark City, and he played the Inspector Frank in that. Great movie, great genre movie. He didn't do a great deal of science fiction, but he did obviously appeared in some of the Marvel movies, and he also made another movie I love called Altered States very early in his career, but Dark City. Fabulous movie if you've never seen it. Perhaps we'll talk about that more in a separate video, but R.I.P. William Hurt. And I'd recommend Dark City if you've never seen it.
Yeah, I actually have not seen Dark City, so yeah, I definitely gotta see it.
Very good movie. Yeah, it's William Hurt, Kiefer Sutherland, Rufus Sewell. It's basically, I think it was roughly the same time as The Matrix, and
cyberpunk, right?
Yeah, it's basically a dark, gloomy
neo-noir type of story
where everything keeps changing in this city, and people don't know why, and they can't seem to get out of it, and they don't know why, and things disappear and come back, and there's 2 or 3 people trying to uncover why that is, including William Hurt's character. Don't want to give any more than that away. it doesn't go where you expect it to go. The reasons for that, and it's a pretty stunning ending. Revelations at the end, but it's a great movie. Yeah, fantastic performances, very dark. So yeah, look out for that one. So yeah, I'll just like to. I think we've lost Redshirt. I know he was having some internet problems. So just if we could wrap up by doing some. I want to see what you guys are got coming up soon. So please feel free to plug your stuff, Nerdporeal. Thank you for coming on, by the way.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a very stimulating conversation. Right now, what do I have going on? Well, my current project is I'm working on an Orville video, basically kind of like an introductory video for people that are kind of on the fence or not really into, might not be into Star Trek or science fiction in general. I just kind of, it's my way. This is kind of my way of saying, hey, this. I'm basically talking about the setting. I'm basically introducing the setting and the type of show it is, and to kind of get people more excited about it and stuff, because I think it's a really great show, and something I definitely want. I can't wait to see. So that's the current video I'm working on. I'm going to be doing a stream on Saturday. I'm going to have a panel. We're going to be discussing the movie The Fellowship of the Ring. Because of all this Lord of the Rings stuff been coming out, and I figure, let's talk about something that makes us happy, and that Peter Jackson trilogy makes a lot of people happy.
Isn't that problematic? I mean, Tolkien had some problems. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, he didn't like technology, and he liked the good things in life. He liked to smoke, smoke his pipe, eat delicious food, drink beer, and go walks in the park, and hang out with good friends. And then go on adventures.
Indeed. You like real ale, that's for sure.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure to watch your channel. It's great to stream with you. We don't have the chance, or haven't had the chance to do that very much, but I'm pretty sure we'll be doing it again soon. So,
this was pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks for joining me, mate. Kai, my friend, what are you got going on? And just before we do anything else, buy this book, everybody, especially now when get the collector's edition with the printing errors. Space Crime Domino, Kai M.F.S. Sorry, Kai, I had to show that on screen for you. There you go.
It's all right. People can wait a month or so. I'll have the better version up soon with no errors. But I still have a few of the... Sorry, what?
Yeah, what are you up to, sir? Yes, let us know.
Oh, yeah. So I do a late night show on my channel at 11 p.m. Pacific. I'm starting to post highlights and stuff from it. But yeah, catch me on my channel, 11 p.m. Pacific, for a little late night show. I generally talk, psychology, cryptocurrency, NFTs, sci-fi, entertainment, whatever. We have fun. It's a late night show. So then also my book, and I think that's about all I want to touch on for now. Yeah, check out my channel if you want to see more.
All right, mate. Thanks for joining me. I really do appreciate it. And as I said to Nerdporeal, I'm sure we'll do it again.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I love talking sci-fi. So thanks for having me.
Great. No problem, mate. Captain Trek, my friend, it's always a pleasure to stream with you. If I could get up early enough in the morning, I would join you more. Tell me, what are you up to, my friend?
Well, right now I am still doing morning brew at 6 a.m. Central. I know it's early for a lot of people, so yeah. That's why I'm trying to do some different streams as well.
Good, and yes, the morning brew is always great. And I must tell you, I will be going back to seasonal work again in April, so I'll be on shift work again. So if it's still on in the mornings, there's at least 2 or 3 days a week I'll be able to join you, or listen to you at least. So. and chat in the chat. So
cool.
Thanks, my friend, for joining. It's always a pleasure, and I'm sure, as I said to the others, we will do this again sometime. Always scope for sci-fi chat. Don't go away yet, though. We're not quite done. So just before we go, I'd like to thank everybody in the chat for joining. You're all wonderful, wonderful people. As I say, lots of other things you could watch, particularly on this day. At this time, there's some big hitters started streaming around it at this time, but you've all chosen to join me and chat. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you being in there. You've all made some great comments. You know your stuff, and I'm always humbled that you're willing to hang out with little old me. So thank you for that. Thanks again to my panelists. I will be on Toxic Tuesday on 32 Flavors of Nick Visor tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Pacific. This week we're doing Animal House. What can I say? 10 out of 10 already. Love that movie. I'll also be working on a couple of videos, one of my Underlooked band series on a band called the Raspberries. So one of my favorite 70s bands. And I've got a new science fiction novel video in the works, painstakingly putting that one together. And I might do a little William Hurt appreciation too. So that's what's going on this week. But I did promise in the blurb for the show that we were going to show possibly the greatest science fiction themed song ever. And at the risk of getting my channel struck for copyright, not that I make any money off it, we're going to do that. So we're going to finish with a little... Sorry, go ahead.
If it's Star Trekking across the universe,
it's
only
not
going forward because we can't find reverse.
That's the second best one.
Yeah, that one will get you a strike. Or not a strike, a claim. That one will get you a claim. I know because I played it on my channel.
And I'm not making any money. I ain't making no money. So I'm going to... So it isn't that one. This is actually the greatest science fiction themed, because I'm a music guy. I'd like to finish with some music. So let's watch this magnificent video. Well, as I say, the greatest science fiction themed song ever made in history.
I never heard that one.
Sarah Brightman. Sarah Brightman is somebody call Archer Colin, who's obviously a Brit too. Sarah Brightman was the singer. I lost my heart to a Starship Trooper. Sarah Brightman was married to Andrew Lloyd Webber, who you may know from all these big musical hits like whatever, Cats and blah blah blah. He did a ton of those big Broadway musical hits. So, but that was late 70s, and you can't get better than that. I mean, come on.
I'd never heard that before. This is the first time I've ever heard this one.
Yeah, what I love about it particularly is, first of all, the arthritic choreography, because it's terrible and they can barely move. But secondly,
they did like a chicken thing at one point.
Right. And then the thing, they're putting their legs up, but they have to be helped back down again. But also the this is Starcom, blah blah blah. It sounds like they're in convoy, you know, like they've all got police radios. But anyway, I love that. Sarah Brightman, God bless. She starred in Phantom of the Opera and all these other Andrew Lloyd Webber things, and she's quite hot. But you know, anyway, I thought I'd end on that happy note. Once again, thank you to the panel, thank you to the chat. Please like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, all that good stuff, and I will see you all again next week. So till then, cheerio, and I've got my exceptionally short video to play us out.